Welcome to Terror Tales. Gather around the campfire. Join our circle as we share true, terrifying stories from the shadows of the real world. Subscribe and become part of the camp. The night is long, and you're not alone. My name is Brandon. On the night of May 13, 2008, I was driving home from a friend's place in Canby, Minnesota. I'd been celebrating my graduation from a local community college. Instead of taking the straight shot down Highway 68, I was on the gravel back roads between Canby and my hometown of Marshall. I loved driving, and maybe I'd had a little too much to drink and wanted to avoid the state troopers on the main road. My car, a white 1996 Saturn S2, slid into a ditch. It wasn't a bad crash, but the car was stuck. I wasn't hurt. I called my dad on my cell phone around 1:30 a.m. He told me to wait, that he was coming to get me. We stayed on the line. I got tired of waiting in the car. So I decided to walk towards the lights of Lind, which I thought I could see in the distance. I told my dad I could see the town. The night was pitch black, no moon, and the air was cool. I kept talking to him as I walked, the gravel crunching under my boots, following the lonely road through flat, open farmland. I told my dad about the party, about my plans. Then I saw lights, not the distant glow of a town, but something closer, brighter, and moving oddly across the fields. I can see some lights, I told him. The lights didn't look like car headlights or a farmhouse porch light. They were just wrong. I kept walking, the tall grass whispering against my jeans. The lights seemed to dance, sometimes low to the ground, sometimes higher up, with no source I could make out. They would disappear and then reappear closer. My dad asked what I was talking about, but I couldn't explain it. Then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The lights were now between me and the distant hum of a highway I couldn't see. They weren't just lights anymore. They were outlining a shape, a dark, solid mass that was moving silently through the field, blocking my path. It was massive and utterly silent. There was no engine sound, no animal noise, just the wind and this thing. My dad heard me stop. He heard my sharp intake of breath. I was 19. I wasn't a kid who scared easy. But what I was looking at wasn't right. It wasn't from around here. The last thing I ever said to him was 2 words, my voice low and stunned. Oh shit. The line went dead. My phone was never found. My body was never found. Search parties combed thousands of acres of that farmland. They found my car right where I said it was, stuck in the ditch. They found no sign of a struggle where I was walking, no footprints leading to a riverbank, no evidence I was shot by some trigger, happy farmer. The official search was called off, but people still talk. They say that on certain dark nights out in those fields, near the Yellow Medicine River, if your car breaks down, you might see lights moving where no lights should be. You might hear a faint, staticky crackle, like a dead cell phone line. And if you're unlucky, you might hear a final, terrified whisper on the wind right before the silence closes in for good. Oh, shit. My name is Ted. It was the evening of February 24th, 1978. We were a group of friends. Me, Jack Wett, Bill Sterling, Jack Madruga, and Gary Mathias. They called us the Yuba County Five. We were all from Marysville, California, men in our 20s and 30s, and we all had mild learning disabilities or mental health challenges, except for Gary, who was our driver and had a history of psychosis, but was medicated and doing well. We were a tight, knit group, always going to watch our friends' basketball games. That night, we drove in Gary's 1969 Mercury Monterey to see a college basketball game at Chico State University, about a 90-minute drive from Marysville through the Sierra Nevada foothills. The game ended around 10 p.m. We should have been home by midnight. We never made it. What happened next is a puzzle with most of the pieces missing. The official report says our car was seen on a remote mountain road near Oroville, miles past any logical turnoff for home. The road, Forest Route 96, was a narrow, winding gravel track that led up into the Plumas National Forest, into territory that was rugged and sparsely populated even in the summer. In February, with a light snow falling, it was unforgiving. The car, a pale yellow two-door, was found 4 months later, on April 4, parked neatly at the end of a Forest Service road near a place called Forbustown. It was in good condition, with a full tank of gas and a working battery. There was no sign of a struggle. Inside, the map was folded to show our route home, the correct route, highlighting Highway 70. Why we left the main highway and drove 20 miles into the mountains remains the central mystery. My body was the first to be found. On June 4, 1978, a group of foresters stumbled upon a ranger's cabin at a remote fishing and hunting camp called Jones Bar. The cabin was 14 miles from where the car was abandoned. I was inside, in a bed. I had been dead for a long time. The coroner said I died of starvation and hypothermia, but there was a cruel twist. The cabin was stocked with a substantial supply of canned food. None of the cans had been opened. There were also mattresses with their covers removed, suggesting someone had tried to use them for warmth. A single coffee pot was on the wood, burning stove, which had been used to melt snow for drinking water. I had survived for an estimated 2 to 3 months after we disappeared. The remains of my friends, Bill Sterling and Jack Madruga, were discovered a year later, in 1979, scattered along a steep hillside about 3 miles from the cabin. Their skeletons showed no signs of trauma or violence. They had simply succumbed to the elements. Jack Hewitt's body was found much later, in 1981, also in the wilderness. Only Gary Mathias was never found. The questions are endless and terrifying. Why did we leave a warm, functioning car to trek through snow in inadequate clothing? How did I, the one who was eventually found in a shelter, manage to survive the longest, yet fail to open the food that would have saved my life? Why were my friends scattered miles away from the cabin? Theories abound. Some say we were spooked by something, a threat that made us flee the car and keep moving deeper into the wilderness. Others suggest one of us had a psychotic episode and led the others astray. But the most persistent and chilling theory involves a sixth party. The cabin showed signs of more than just my presence. The mattresses had been used by multiple people. The food was there, untouched. It was as if someone, or something, was with us in that cabin. Someone who either would not let us eat, or whose presence was so paralyzing that we simply did not dare. Perhaps that same presence herded my friends out into the snow to die after I was gone. The final, unanswerable question hangs over the entire tragedy. What did we see on that mountain road that made 5 grown men drive away from safety and into the heart of the winter darkness? And who was the 5th man in the cabin with me? The one who watched me starve to death surrounded by plenty, and who then walked away, leaving no tracks in the melting spring snow. The forest holds its secrets, and the cabin at Jones Bar stands as a silent monument to a terror that none of us could ever explain. My name is Elisa. It was January 31st, 2013, and I was a 21-year-old Canadian student on a solo trip, traveling by train from Toronto to California. I checked into the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. I'd chosen it for its affordability, though I knew little of its history. A history woven with threads of violence and despair, from the residence of the Night Stalker to countless other tragedies. My room was on the 5th floor. The first few days were typical of a tourist. I visited the Central Library, browsed bookstores, and took pictures. I documented my travels in a blog, writing about the strange charm of the old hotel. But by January 31st, something began to shift. In my blog posts, I mentioned feeling unwell, and I had emailed my parents back in Vancouver to tell them I was feeling strange and having trouble sleeping. I had stopped taking my prescribed medication for bipolar disorder, a decision I now know can have profound and unpredictable effects. The hotel staff would later report that I had been behaving erratically, complaining about the lock on my room door and asking to change rooms. I was moved to a room on the 4th floor. Security footage from the hotel's elevator, which would later be dissected by millions online, shows my final documented moments. The elevator video is a silent film of escalating dread. The elevator car arrives on the 14th floor. I step inside, dressed in a red hoodie and dark pants. I press a series of buttons, but the doors do not close. I peer out into the hallway, first with curiosity, then with increasing apprehension. I retreat into the corner of the elevator, pressing myself against the wall, as if trying to hide from someone or something standing just outside the frame. I gesture with my hands, having a conversation with an unseen presence. I step out of the elevator, adopting a strange, swaying walk, moving my hands in a fluid, almost dance-like motion. Then I exit the frame, to the left. The elevator doors remain open for several more minutes before finally closing. The hallway cameras never captured me again. For the next 2 weeks, hotel guests began complaining about low water pressure and the strange, dark taste of the water from their taps. The management conducted routine checks. On the morning of February 19th, a maintenance worker named Santiago Lopez went to the roof to investigate the hotel's 4 massive, dark green, 1-gallon water tanks. The roof was a stark landscape of gravel vents, and the 4 cylindrical tanks, each about 8 feet tall. The lids were heavy, requiring significant effort to remove. When Lopez lifted the lid on the southeastern tank, he saw something impossible. I was inside, floating naked and lifeless in the dark, cold water. My clothes, my watch, and my room key were at the bottom of the tank. The investigation that followed was a masterclass in contradictions. How did I access the roof, which was secured by a locked door and a fire escape alarm? How did I open the heavy, bolted lid of the water tank, a feat the maintenance worker himself described as difficult? Why was there no water found in my lungs during the initial autopsy? A finding that was later revised. The official cause of death was listed as an accidental drowning, with my bipolar disorder as a significant contributing factor. The theory was that I had experienced a psychotic episode, somehow made it to the roof, and climbed into the tank. But the questions multiplied like shadows. The ladder leading up the side of the tank was narrow and rusted. The lid was found closed when I was discovered. The hotel's history seemed to press down on the case, a weight of accumulated sorrow. Online sleuths pored over every detail. They noted the eerie similarities between the Cecil Hotel and the film Dark Water. They analyzed the elevator footage frame by frame, suggesting I was hiding from a pursuer, or that my hand gestures were a coded message. The most terrifying possibility is not that I was the victim of a random, tragic accident during a mental health crisis. The more chilling narrative is one of calculated circumstance. Was the roof door actually locked that night? Was the alarm functional? Could someone with intimate knowledge of the hotel's routines have facilitated this? The hotel was a transient place, a labyrinth of strangers. The water tank itself became a perfect, isolated prison, a cold, dark, and suffocating end, hidden in plain sight, supplying water to the very guests who unknowingly consumed it for weeks. The final, unshakable image is not of the elevator, nor the tank, but of the hotel itself. It stands as a silent witness, its corridors and pipes a circulatory system for secrets. My story ends in a tank on a roof, but the true horror lies in the absolute uncertainty of my final journey. Did I walk there alone, driven by a broken mind? Or was I led by a presence as tangible as the hotel's worn carpets and as ephemeral as a shadow in an elevator doorway? The water, once drawn, has long since flowed away, but the stain of the mystery remains, permanent and dark. My name is Igor. It was late January 1959. I was a 23-year-old engineering student at the Ural Polytechnical Institute, and I was leading a hiking expedition of 9 other experienced skiers and mountaineers. Our goal was to reach Otorten, a mountain in the northern Ural Mountains, a journey categorized as grade 3rd, the most difficult level of hiking in the Soviet Union. The trek was to be our crowning achievement, a testament to our skill and endurance. Our group was a mix of students and graduates, all in our 20s, filled with the vigor and optimism of Khrushchev's thaw. There was Yuri Doroshenko, a radio engineering student, Lyudmila Dubanina, a civil engineer known for her fierce determination, Zinaida Kolmogorova, my fellow organizer, and Rustam Slobodin, a talented athlete. We were all bound by a love for the harsh, pristine beauty of the Urals. We documented everything in diaries and cameras, leaving a detailed record of our journey until the very end. We began our fateful ascent of Kolet Syakhl, which translates, ominously, to Mountain of the Dead, on February 1st. The weather was deteriorating, with blowing snow and dropping temperatures. We made camp that evening on the mountain slope, in a sheltered area just below the tree line. In my last diary entry, I wrote about our progress and the challenging conditions, but there was no hint of alarm. We were prepared for this. We were professionals. What happened that night between February 1st and 2nd is a riddle that has defied all logical explanation for decades. Weeks later, when we failed to send a scheduled telegram, a massive search operation was launched. On February 26th, our tent was found. It was a scene of utter chaos, but of a very specific and bizarre kind. The tent had been cut open from the inside. Our belongings, boots, warm clothing, passports, money, were all left behind. The tent was filled with our personal effects, as if we had been in the middle of preparing for sleep. But we were gone, having fled into the sub-Arctic night in varying states of undress, some of us wearing only our long underwear and one sock. The searchers followed our footprints, which told a fragmented and frantic story. The tracks, from 8 or 9 people, led down the slope towards the edge of a dense forest of Siberian cedars, about a mile away. The prints suggested we were walking, then running, but not in panic. Initially, we seemed to be moving in an orderly fashion. There was no evidence of a struggle or of anyone pursuing us. The first 2 bodies were found under the large cedar tree at the forest's edge, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonichenko. They were barefoot, dressed only in their underwear. The remains of a small fire were nearby, and the lower branches of the cedar tree were broken, as if someone had climbed it, perhaps to get a glimpse of the tent they had just fled. They had died of hypothermia. The next 3 bodies were discovered in the snow between the cedar tree and the tent. Myself, Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin. We had died trying to return to the camp. Hypothermia was again the cause. There were no outward signs of trauma. The mystery deepened profoundly 2 months later, when the spring thaw revealed the final 4 members of our group in a shallow ravine further into the woods. Lyudmila Dubanina, Alexander Kolovatov, Nikolay Thigoks-Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov. They had suffered catastrophic injuries. Thigoks-Brignol's skull was crushed. Zolotaryov and Dubanina had massive chest fractures, with the force compared to that of a car crash. Dubanina was missing her tongue, her lips, and part of her facial tissue. Crucially, there was no external bleeding, and no soft tissue damage on their heads, indicating the immense force was applied without breaking the skin. Their clothes were found to be highly radioactive. The official Soviet investigation was closed, citing an overwhelming natural force as the cause. The files were classified. The theories that have emerged in the decades since are a testament to the profound terror of the event. Some point to the indigenous Mansi people, suggesting an attack, but there were no tracks other than our own, and the nature of the injuries was not consistent with a human weapon. Avalanche. The slope was too gentle, and our tent, though abandoned, remained standing. Military testing. The area was off limits to civilians, and the radioactive clothing and internal injuries suggest exposure to an intense, concussive energy source. Infrasound, caused by the wind, could have induced panic, but it cannot crush chests or remove a tongue. The most chilling possibility is that we encountered something for which we had no frame of reference. Something that compelled us, a group of rational, hardened engineers and athletes, to slash our only shelter and flee, half-dressed, into a lethal blizzard. Perhaps it was a weapon test gone wrong, an energy we could not see or hear until it was upon us. Perhaps it was something else entirely, something that resides in those remote mountains. The ending is not a conclusion, but a void of understanding. We did not simply die on the mountain of the dead. We were separated, our bodies found in different states, some frozen in flight, others broken by an invisible hand. The true horror of the Dyatlov Pass incident is not in the grotesque injuries, but in the complete and utter failure of every logical, scientific, and criminal explanation. It is the terror of the unknown, a force so powerful it could send 10 experts to their deaths without leaving a single trace of itself behind. Only a slashed tent and a trail of footprints leading into the dark. My name is Tom. That wasn't the name we used then, but it's the one I use now, after everything. In 1994, my wife Ellen and I bought a modest 480-acre ranch in a remote part of the Uinta Basin in northeastern Utah. We wanted a quiet life, a place to raise our 2 children and run a few head of cattle. The property was beautiful, a vast expanse of high desert and scrubland set against a dramatic backdrop of the Uinta Mountains. The price was surprisingly low, but we attributed that to its isolation. We had no idea we were purchasing a parcel of land that seemed to be a crossroads for the inexplicable. The anomalies began almost immediately. We would find our cattle roaming loose, their heavy steel gates swung open, though the locks were untouched. Then, we started finding the cattle themselves, but not alive. The first one was a full-grown, healthy heifer. She was lying in a small depression in the ground, her cause of death a complete mystery. There was no blood on the soil, no signs of a predator attack. The local vet was baffled. Then we found another, and another. The injuries were not just mysterious. They were surgically precise. A cow would be found with its genitals removed with a cleanliness that defied any known tool. The incisions were cauterized, as if by immense heat. There were no tracks leading to or from the carcasses, not a single paw print, boot print, or tire mark. It was as if the animals had been dropped from the sky, manipulated by an invisible hand, and then discarded. The lights in the sky were a constant. Not just distant, twinkling stars, but structured craft of immense size and impossible maneuverability. They would hover silently over the mesa, triangular in shape, with lights at each point. They could accelerate from a dead stop to vanishing over the horizon in a heartbeat. Sometimes they would descend into the property, dropping below the tree line, and we would feel a low, subsonic hum that vibrated in our teeth and bones. The phenomena were not confined to the skies. Opaque, black spheres, about the diameter of a large beach ball, would materialize in the air and drift through the property. They seemed to move with purpose, with intelligence. sometimes hovering outside our children's bedroom windows. They were silent and absorbed all light, a perfect void against the desert sky. One afternoon, my son and I were checking fences on the western perimeter when we saw one of them. It was floating about 50 yards away, motionless. I raised my rifle, not to shoot, but to look through the scope. The moment the crosshairs found it, the sphere instantly vanished. Not zoomed away, it simply ceased to exist in that spot. A second later, it reappeared directly behind us. So close I could feel a static charge raise the hairs on my arm. It then shot straight up and was gone. The feeling was not of being observed, but of being toyed with. The most terrifying incidents involved the portals. On the property was a specific area, a small, dry gulch, where the air itself would seem to thicken and warp. I once saw a large, wolf-like creature enter this gulch. It was unlike any wolf I had ever seen. Its proportions were wrong, its gait unnaturally fluid. It walked into the shimmering air and did not come out the other side. It was just gone. Another time, I witnessed a humanoid figure, tall and impossibly thin, step out from behind a juniper tree that was too small to conceal it. It stood there, observing me, before turning and walking directly into the rock face of a cliff, disappearing into solid stone. The psychological toll was immense. We were living in a place where the fundamental rules of reality did not apply. Our family was gripped by a constant, low-grade terror. We stopped talking about it with each other. The fear was so immense. The final straw was an evening when our youngest daughter woke up screaming, pointing at the ceiling, insisting a red-eyed man was watching her from the corner of the room. The next day, deep, three-toed claw marks were found scraped into the exterior wall directly below her window. There was no soil disturbed beneath the window. No way anything could have reached that height. We abandoned the ranch in 1996. We left almost all of our possessions behind. We just got in our truck and drove away, financially ruined and psychologically shattered. The story does not end with our departure. The property was eventually purchased by a billionaire, Robert Bigelow, through his company, the National Institute for Discovery Science. They conducted a formal, scientific investigation, installing motion sensors, magnetic anomaly detectors, and 24-hour surveillance. Their findings, some of which were later revealed through a Pentagon UFO program, confirmed everything we had experienced. They documented massive magnetic anomalies, recorded footage of the black spheres, and collected evidence of off-world vehicles not made on this Earth. The true, terrifying ending of this story is not that we fled. It is what has been confirmed since. The phenomena are real. The ranch is a permanent, active site of something beyond human understanding. The government and private aerospace have been studying it for decades, and they are just as baffled as we were. The land we owned was not just haunted, it was an intersection, a place where the fabric of our world is thin, where things from somewhere else can step through. And the most chilling conclusion from all the data, from all the witnesses, from the scientists and the spies, is that these things are not just visiting. They have always been there, and they are aware of us in a way we can never be of them. The ranch still stands, a silent, government-contracted research facility, a monument to the fact that we are not alone on this planet, and that the other occupants are utterly, terrifyingly in control.